Good day. Welcome to Agenda. I'm Regina Lay, sitting in for Cito Beltran today. We are One News, all sides, all the time. As always, let's start the program with the quote for the day. And today we're saying that he who walks with the wise will be wise. Good one to start the day. Now let's take a look at the front pages of the Philippine Star. Bantag faces court raps for lapid slay, it says. In a resolution made public yesterday, Justice Department prosecutors say that they found probable cause to indict suspended Bureau of Corrections Chief Gerald Bantag and several others for the killing of broadcast journalist Percival Mabasa, better known as Percy Lapid, and the alleged middleman in his kill contract, Cristito June Villamor. The sunken tanker and oil spill lacked permits is the next headline. In yesterday's Senate hearing, lawmakers uncovered that the MT Princess Empress oil tanker sailed without an updated certificate of public convenience, or CPC. We've got Teves, 6 others face illegal gun charges. Police have filed criminal complaints against Negros Oriental Congressman Arnolfo Teves Jr. and 6 other persons in connection with the firearms and explosives seized from the lawmakers' properties. 12,000 troops to join the largest Philippines-United States Balikatan. Some 12,000 American soldiers will be arriving in the country over the next few weeks to participate in the 2023 Balikatan exercises. This will be the biggest joint training event between the armed forces of the Philippines and the United States military. Right-sizing bill gets House nod with 292 affirmative votes and only 3 votes against. The House of Representatives approved on third and final reading the bill that seeks to streamline all government offices in the country. This right-sizing bill will aim to save about 15 billion pesos of public funds annually. All right, let's get into our guest segments. The outsourcing industry in the country is alive and growing at unprecedented levels. At least that's according to consultancy Outsource Accelerator. To talk us through this, we have Outsource Accelerator founder and CEO Derek Gallimore. Let's get to know him first in this short video.
Derek Gallimore is the founder and CEO of Outsource Accelerator, a consultancy job marketplace for the BPO industry. Gallimore is now based in Manila, which is considered as one of the top outsourcing places in the world.
Good setup right there. Good morning, Derek. Thanks for joining us on the show today.
Hi, Regina. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to get right into it. We don't have a lot of time and there's so much to get to parse through. I wanted to start by saying that I saw your recent report saying that the Philippine outsourcing industry generated $32.4 billion in revenues for 2022. That's smashed all expectations. What's behind this growth story?
The outsourcing industry is really reaching, a crescendo. It's a perfect storm at the moment. Obviously, the world is entering into sort of recessionary times. Recently, we had COVID, which forced a lot of people to really reckon with remote work. And of course, we've had the Great Resignation, and a lot of the workers are requesting to go remote. So all of these sort of factors are encouraging businesses overseas to explore offshore employment. And the value proposition of offshore employment is just so great that we are just seeing sustained growth of CAGRs of around sort of 8, 9, 10%. And this is showing no signs of slowing down.
You talked about value proposition. When you say value proposition, are we just talking cost efficiency here? Is that the only value that the countries like the Philippines brings to the table?
Look,
meaning to say cheaper workforce, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's a significant talking point, and I think that attracts the initial interest. But we have to remind people it's not just about price, of course, it's about value. And with that is about quality, of course. And that's why the Philippines is one of the market leaders, because it's not just about cheap staffing. It is about 30 years of executive experience in the outsourcing industry and adding value to business processes. And of course, on top of that, there's also access to abundant talent. It's not just about the staffing. It's the fact that you can now access a global work pool of nearly 8 billion people around the world instead of just employing locally.
Right. And this success that we're seeing across the board for outsourcing, is that across industries, across regions in the Philippines, and across the different pillars, for instance, voice, non-voice, KPO? Is that all across the board, or it's concentrated around particular verticals or regions?
No, we're seeing it everywhere. The more traditional part of the industry, which of course is the voice and call centers with the big enterprise clients, they seem to have sustained growth, despite people saying it was a sunset industry some years ago. The new entrant to the market is really the new next-gen BPOs, as I call them, which are catering to the small and medium-sized businesses of the West. And that market is going through explosive growth. I believe that there's about 40 million new jobs that could come offshore over the next sort of 10 to 20 years, because the SME market is starting to realize the opportunity of offshore staffing, and that they're realizing that it is accessible to them also, not just the big enterprises.
Right. And that's really fascinating, because you also recently launched a new an index. You call it Time Dr. OA 500. It's what you call the first objective index of the world's top 500 outsourcing firms. And what jumped out at me from that report is really that 84% of the companies here in your study are SMEs. So you're talking 40 million jobs over the next few years. Where are they coming from? Who are these SMEs?
Well, I mean, in the Top Dr. OA 500, they are actually the outsourcing firms. When I refer to the SME clients, that's more the small and medium-sized businesses in the US, whether it's plumbers or bakers or accounting firms or architect firms. All of those are realizing that they can offshore, and the big call centers like the Teleperformance and Accenture, they don't cater to those SMEs. It's more of the next-gen BPOs, and to confuse it somewhat, the SMEs of the BPO industry that actually cater to the SMEs as the clients. And this part of the industry is just exploding, because very quickly, if you just look at the enterprise market overseas, 99% of those companies already outsource. So there is very little growth to be had, whereas 0.5% of small and medium-sized businesses in the West currently offshore. So that is the blue ocean. That is the growth potential.
Doesn't it kind of go against what countries like, for instance, the US are trying to do now, which is bring back jobs to America? I mean, President Joe Biden has made that one of his campaign rallying points, if you would. And the drive there being to try to bring back some of these jobs that they've offshored in recent years to America. Does that not play into this at all?
Well, I think the force of globalization will outstand sort of peaks and troughs in terms of political upset. And of course, we're going through the sort of China thing at the moment, and people are looking for supply chain security. And so things are being repatriated back to each country. But I think the forces of globalization cannot really be resisted, in that we are becoming increasingly globalized. And for 30 to 50 years, everyone in America now is driving an Asian car. The computers are made in Asia. Everything is made offshore. They're wearing Italian shoes, and the shirts are made in Turkey. We live in a truly globalized economy, and the last bastion of that globalization was staffing. because you could always import goods for a long time, but you couldn't really have that exchange of professional services until the internet came along. But now, of course, the internet is here, and it means that people can work and contribute economically from wherever they're sitting. So that is a major sea change, and that will see huge shifts in employment trends.
Right. And exactly as you said at the start, which is that it's a confluence of factors, right? Now you've also got work from home becoming mainstream, right? Literally, we are all sitting in our homes and able to like communicate and work with each other and collaborate. I wanted you to, if you could, just talk me a little bit more through these next gen SMEs that you brought up. What industries are they from? Where in the world are they from? And are they looking at the Philippines or Asia in general? And are we competing with other countries here?
For the outsourcing firms, you mean? They are, look, the Philippines is prolific in terms of its outsourcing supply. I am biased, of course. I've been living here 9 years. I believe Philippines is the best destination for outsourcing services, bar none. And there are a lot of attempts of new entrants into the market. You know, every emerging market really wants to enter the outsourcing space because it is an incredible economic driver. And we have regular conversations, you know, with Kenya and Ethiopia and Jordan and Uzbekistan and Fiji, all, you know, Vietnam's obviously in vogue at the moment, Colombia, the Balkans. So all of these countries are trying to get into outsourcing. So, of course, it's up to the Philippines to remain competitive and instill their position as one of the market leaders. And I really believe the Philippines has what it takes to lead this industry.
That's a good point. Are we still competitive? I mean, I know that the trade industries like trade groups like IBPAP have been, you know, doing a lot in terms of marketing the country, and PEZA is also, you know, rolling out the red carpet to investors. But you also correctly pointed out that competition is getting stiffer. So the question there is, are we doing enough to you know, if not get a bigger share of the market, then at least protect our part of the pie?
Yeah, look, no country, no business can ever rest on laurels. It is a highly competitive market, and hopefully that will keep everyone, you know, on their toes. It is true that you've got to educate the masses. You've got to get the skills into the workforce. But these are, you know, they're pressures that every market is facing. You know, up until a few months ago, there was a shortage of good staff everywhere in the world. There's generally a staffing shortage, whether it's tech people, whether it's just sort of workers in Starbucks. So it's up to the Philippines to remain competitive and continually upskill their workforce. And, you know, that's happening. It's never fast enough, but I would suggest that that's consistent with any hot market.
And upskilling, you know, that sets us up perfectly for my next question. We have to talk AI, of course, artificial intelligence. I mean, just last night, the company known as OpenAI released a new version of its ChatGPT software, and that's the one that's been making headlines recently, right? There's a bit of an AI arms race right now, if headlines are to be believed. Let's start with that. How do you think the outsourcing industry should respond to all of this?
It's got to embrace the tools. You can't sort of deny it. You've got to embrace the tools. And for the short term, at least, it will be humans building these tools and humans managing and directing these tools. So, you know, I see no threat in the short to medium term. AI could completely change the rules of the game in terms of what it means to, you know, to work and to employ and to generate things. If that happens, it happens universally across the world, across the entire workforce. So it won't just impact outsourcing. It won't just impact the Philippines. This will be a global, universal issue. The call centers are slightly, you know, at risk if they're doing high repetition, low value tasks. And so that is, again, an incentive for the industry to upskill and to go up the value ladder into the sort of KPOs and staff augmentation instead of these sort of, mass production kind of facilities.
What are some of these high repetition, low value tasks?
Well, a lot of it I would suggest is voice, but it's also like call center functions. So whether it's customer service, whether it's AR, PR, payroll, all of these things that involve a lot of people doing the same function on a repetitive nature. And it won't suddenly be gone, but you just find that every month or every year, there are operational efficiencies that are made through tools, through automation, and it might reduce the work required by 1%, 2%, and that just cumulatively erodes the work that needs to be done. But there is also a strong argument as AI comes along and as we get increasingly sophisticated, there will be even more sophisticated problems that we need to deal with. So, it just sort of keeps on unraveling as we go. I have no immediate concern, to be honest.
And so the trick really is to start to migrate the workforce to more high value added work, which the industry groups have been talking about for a number of years now. I remember even before the pandemic, but now AI is actually here. We're not talking about the advent of, we're talking about it's happening right now. What would that look like for us to migrate the workforce to more high value added tasks? Well, what does that entail? Is that what they call KPO? Is that data management, data analysis? Well, what is it?
It's already happened. For the last 20, 30 years, the industry has been upskilling. And to use a simple analogy, when they first outsourced manufacture to China, they were sort of cheap and relatively incompetent. But now, 20 or 30 years later, they are building the world's best technology in the most advanced factories. And America cannot even compete with that. And now America's realizing, oh my gosh, these people are far too sophisticated for us. We need to get back some of that skill. And with, unbeknownst to the Philippines, that's actually happening here. It's just that it's with professional services and functions as opposed to physical manufacturing. And so what you have today compared to 20 years ago is vastly different in the outsourcing industry. The staff are highly sophisticated. They're doing increasingly sophisticated functions within businesses. And then also they spread within a business. It's no longer just customer service, but it's every function within a business. And you also see with the next gen BPOs, it's more of a staff augmentation. So you have staff in the Philippines working side by side, shoulder to shoulder with staff in the US, just like normal employment. And that is where the true value is for the Philippines. And in those kind of roles, you get accountants, architects, doctors, content writers, web designers, developers, anything like that. All of that is being done now in the Philippines, working shoulder to shoulder with US and UK and Canadian businesses.
Derek, that's an interesting concept. Staff augmentation. You gave some examples, for instance, accountants and architects working together, but what is the nature of the work there? What does that actually look like in practice? What do they work on together?
Yeah, it's the modern businesses today, 99% of the work is done in front of a computer. And so any of that work does not then need to be done in Silicon Valley or wherever that company originates. A lot of the work as well can be done asynchronously. So, whether you're building a website or developing, code or writing content or, doing the books, all of that can be done remotely. Whether it's sort of a group of 20 people sitting in Silicon Valley working remotely, they're now realizing actually half of our team or maybe all of our team could be sitting in the Philippines doing it. And they do it to, the same caliber. And so it's really, that is the true movement here. It is the narrative is more about global employment. And it's just hiring the best people at the best quality at the best price. regardless of where they're sitting. So a New York company, instead of spending $20,000 a month on whatever role they're looking to hire, they can say, look, we're going to explore in the Philippines for $4,000 or $5,000 a role. It's an excellent deal for that New York company, and it's an excellent deal for the Philippine workforce. And you're just seeing that flooding in droves.
Final thoughts on AI, Derek. I gather you've already said you're not that worried short term, long term. It's something that we should be looking at in terms of augmenting the capabilities of the workforce here. What else is there to consider when it comes to AI and how it could potentially disrupt the industry?
I think in the short term, harness the fire, like use those tools and incorporate them into your processes, because then you're providing better value add for the clients. And don't be afraid of them, embrace them. I think long term, if we reach a sort of level of like general intelligence, then it will, sort of gravity will be dissolved, cancer will be solved, and it really changes what it means to live on the planet if there is super intelligence. So I can't answer for that. Maybe we'll all just go and sit on the beach and drink pina coladas. But in the short term, embrace the tools and embrace the technology.
Isn't that the dream? Fantastic insights. Thank you so much, Derek Gallimore, founder and CEO of Outsource Accelerator. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks.
We're going to pause for a quick break now. Agenda will return right after this. Keep it here on One News, all sides, all the time. Welcome back to Agenda. I'm Regina Lay, sitting in for Cito Beltran today. Lawmakers are pushing to raise wages for employees in the private sector across all regions. Now, what would the ideal increase be? To answer that, let's bring in our next guest.
Rene Magtubo is the chairperson of Partido ng Manggagawa. He is also the spokesperson of Nagkaisa Labor Coalition. Aside from this, Magtubo also serves as Marikina City Councilor.
Good morning, Rene. Thank you for joining us this morning. Today.
Good morning po at maraming salamat sa pag-imbita.
You're very
Good
welcome.
morning sa ating tagapakinig.
All right. I'm going to get right into it, Rene. Senate President Magtubo just yesterday filed the bill to increase the minimum wages nationwide by 150 pesos per day. On the other hand, you have the Makabayan Bloc. They're filing a House bill that will mandate employers to pay an additional 750 pesos naman in daily wages. So malaking difference, no? What is your reaction to both of these?
First of all, we welcome all the initiatives sa Senate and the House of Representatives because it would spur discussion on the on wages na kailangan ng mga manggagawa because of inflation. and it will also spur discussion on the mechanism of fixing the minimum wage. So on the part sa House of Representatives, they're proposing a 750 pesos wage increase on the framework that we should have a living wage. 570 Metro Manila minimum wage plus 750, that's 1,250. That's a living wage for a family of 5. On the part of the Senate naman, 150 pesos across the board wage increase naman to recover the lost purchasing power of the peso brought about by the inflation. So may mga processes naman to discuss with. Ang call lang ng mga labor sector is that bilisan ang ganitong mga panukala such that makarecover naman ang mga manggagawa sa kanilang paghihirap dahil sa pagtaas ng presyo ng bilihin. So the question is, gaano kabilis na ma-actionan ng Senate at House of Representatives ang mga proposal na ito para ma-realize na dagdag na sweldo para sa manggagawa.
And in fact, yung original proposal niyo po is only for 100 peso per day increase, correct? So this goes above that.
Yes, we have a petition sa regional wage boards for a 100 pesos wage increase just to recover the lost purchasing power of the peso. Ang kwenta kasi namin last year, 7.8% ang inflation. This year, 8.8%. Nagbumaliktad na 88 pesos na ang nawala sa minimum wage ng mga manggagawa sa Metro Manila. So, to recover, tamang-tama lang na magkaroon ng 100 pesos across wage increase sa mga manggagawa. So, lahat ng ito naman ay hindi na magkakabangga. It's for the government now to decide, no, to address yung panawagan na dapat ay magkaroon ng dagdag na sweldo to recover the lost purchasing power at makaagapay naman sa pagtaas ng presyo ng bilihin yung sweldo ng manggagawa.
You mentioned sustainable standard of living, no? Based on your calculations on the study of your group, how much should the average Filipino family have in order to cover all expenses?
Actually, it's a study ng NEDA long before past administration. It would require almost 1,200 pesos a day for a family of 5. No? Yan yung, kumbaga, magkaroon tayo ng decent living for a family of 5. That is 42,000 more or less a month ang sinasabi ng NEDA. So, if isang spouse ngayon ay nagtatrabaho, isa lang, 570. If both spouses magtatrabaho, pwede makakamit. Pero ang problema kasi, 570 lang minimum wage, tapos tinamaan pa ng inflation, na nawalan yung purchasing power, hirap talaga ang sweldo ng isang head of the family. So, it would require 2 spouses to work para makuha mo yung cost of living for a family of 5. Yan ang problem natin sa ngayon. So, welcome development lahat. Ang inihintay lang namin is that for the government to have a quick action either on the regional wage boards or in Congress para naman ma-address natin yung gap between the cost of living and the wages ng mga manggagawa.
You're right. Kaalala ko na po, this was during the time of former NEDA Secretary Ernie Pernia.
Yeah,
right.
Pernia.
Yung study that they said that wherein they said 42,000 pesos ang kailangan ng average Filipino family of 5 in order to survive. Survive lang yun, hindi pa tayo kasama yung mga expenses. Excuse me po. I just wanted to ask though, the counter argument to this, to raising wages, is that it will make the Philippines less competitive versus other countries like Vietnam, for example, where factory wages are generally cheaper. I mean, you just heard my previous interview with Derek, who's in the outsourcing industry, and he mentioned the competition for offshoring jobs is very stiff, right? Every little price difference counts. What do you have to say to that?
Yung total cost of production naman kasi is not alone wages. Diba? Maraming factors of production.
Pero malaki po yung portion ng wages.
If a company is a labor intensive. If not, hindi gano'ng kalaki. That's one. No? Second, sa lahat naman ng mga nagsasara o kaya nagre-reduce ng labor force nila, it's not wages that is the reason why they reduce work or nagsara. So, maliit na bagay, 10 to 20% yung wage, no, sa factor of production. At ito naman ay mandated by the Constitution, no, bansa natin na dapat ang mga manggagawa living wage ang ina-earn nila on daily basis. So, tingin ko, maraming mga factors na pwedeng pagtulungan ng gobyerno so as maging competitive yung ating mga industries. Tingin namin, hindi magandang policy sa gobyerno natin na hintayin muna natin umunlad yung negosyo bago tayo magtaas ng sweldo. Di ba? It's not either or eh. So, dapat timbangin. Kaya mayroong mga hearings, public hearings sa House of Representatives, sa Senate, for that matter to discuss, no? Kung paano natin iangat pareho yung negosyo at ang mga manggagawa. Pero sa ngayon kasi, the problem is, hindi na makahabol ang sweldo ng mga manggagawa. Before the pandemic, a decade before the pandemic, tumaas yung productivity ng mga manggagawa, pero hindi nahabol yung sweldo. Tapos naman pa ng pandemya, tapos ng inflation pa, malayo na yung agwat ng sweldo sa cost of living. So it's now the duty, I suppose, the government to address this problem. So we welcome nga ang pag-file ni Senate President Zubiri ng bill for across-the-board wage increase and Bakabayan Black sa House for another wage increase. And we are calling for the Department of Labor and Employment na mag-hearing na rin sa petition ng mga magagawa for a wage recovery petition sa regional wage boards. So nandyan na ang mga proposals. It's for the government now to act swiftly para ma-address yung problema.
But in fact, that is what some of the trade groups like ECOP, the Employers Confederation of the Philippines, are saying, no, which is that, well, they say that number one, a lot of businesses might close if we force a wage increase, and number two, a lot of businesses are barely just recovering from the pandemic, right? Totoo naman maraming nalugi during the pandemic.
Yeah.
What do you have to say to that?
Every now and then, kapag may proposal for a wage increase, yun din naman yung argument ng Employers Confederation of the Philippines, eh. Magsasara, magbabawas. Pero studies would show hindi wage increase ang major factor kung bakit nagsasara o nagbabawas ang mga kumpanya. It's the market. Ang tingin pa nga namin, it would be positive sa economy kapag merong purchasing power ang mga manggagawa sapagkat increase ng aggregate demand. No? In the long term, 'di ba, makikinabang din yung negosyo. Ngayon, it's not a good policy, sinasabi namin na hintayin muna natin maka-recover bago natin swelduhan yung mga manggagawa ng karapat-dapat, 'di ba? So, it's a balancing act sa tingin ko. Ngayon, kung hindi naman talaga kaya ng mga businesses, there are programs of the government na pwede nilang i-avail. And second, they could apply for an exemption. Kung talagang may provisions naman sa wage orders ng wage boards na kapag hindi kaya, an establishment can apply for an exemption. So, pag-aaralan. So, hindi lang pwedeng salita lang, patunayan, kung hindi kaya, there is government support and application for exemption.
Kevin, what are some of these government programs that employees can apply for if they really can't afford wage increases?
Sa DTI kasi merong loan program dun sa mga businesses. Alam ko sa sa pandemic pa na siya mag-pursue ng kanyang negosyo to maintain yung kanyang labor force, pwede siya mag-loan interest free. So dun sa DTI, meron doon loan program. Mula dun sa parang ginawa ng pantulong ng Kongreso doon sa mga recovering na mga industriya na tinamaan ng pandemic. That's one. And second, siyempre, sa amin naman, kung hindi talaga kaya, di ba, may exemption naman eh. Exemption naman that they could apply for. So, yung businesses, pwede pa rin mag-apply ng exemption at hingi ng tulong sa gobyerno kung hindi nila kaya ng wage increase. Pero sa ngayon, tingin ko ang priority na policy dapat ng gobyerno is to address this. Kasi kung hindi, lalong maghihirap. May tama ito sa poverty. Poverty natin. At in the long run nga, makakatulong pa rin sa economy sapagkat merong purchasing power yung mga manggagawa to consume goods and services that would spur demand sa ekonomiya natin.
Whilst we're waiting for that to kick in, of course, as you pointed out, mataas na ang inflation, no? Biglang nag 8.7. We don't know if it's the peak. Sabi nila, it could be the peak. It could start slowing down. But then there's so many, global economic factors that are coming into play. For the members of Partido ng Manggagawa and also Nagkaisa Labor Coalition, kamusta naman sila? How are they coping with this inflation? Before we even wait for the potential wage increase to kick in.
Yun yung sad story sapagkat pilit na tinitipid yung kanilang gastusin sa araw-araw. Sa halip na 3 times ang bill mo, di syempre gawin mo ng 2. Sa halip na meron kang magandang breakfast, di tipirin mo na, etc. So, tapos nauobliga yung spouse na maghanap buhay ng konti para makatulong. No? So, ang amin lang problema dito, kapag hindi na-address ito, may epekto ito sa growth ng mga bata, sa mental growth ng mga bata, sa physical growth ng mga bata, sa health ng mga bata in the long run. Kapag matindi na yung poverty at hindi na nakayanan yung mga basic requirements for health at nutrition ng mga bata. So, tingin ko dapat tingnan yan ng gobyerno sapagkat kung hindi, in the long run, may epekto diyan sa labor force natin.
In general, would you say, hindi po ba nafe-feel ng mga workers yung mga subsidies ng government, especially the ones that they rolled out during the pandemic? For instance, transport subsidies, meron din education subsidies. Hindi ba nafe-feel yung impact nun?
Sa wage earners kasi, hindi sila kasali sa 4Ps. Hindi sila kasali sa iba pang mga ayuda. Ang kanilang araw-araw na ginagastos ay base lang sa kanilang sinusweldo. So kapos na yung sweldo. O kaya yun na nga ang hinaing nila, dapat dagdagan na para makarecover naman kami at makagapay sa pagtaas ng presyo. So kaya marami na tayong ina-address na sa 4Ps, no? Million yan. Tapos dahil sa tinamaan din yung sweldo ng mga manggagawa, bahagi na sila ng poverty threshold na yun. Ang sweldo ngayon, 5 days to work lang, ikaw sa 570 pesos, it's a 12,000 lang yan a month, no? Imaginein mo, sabi nga, ang food nutrition mo dapat ay nasa 9,000 plus para lang makasasapat. So, ano pang gastos mo sa ibang mga bagay? Upa sa bahay, bayad sa kuryente, etc. So, imagine mo na kung gaano kagaling sila mag-manage para pagkasyahin yung kinikita nila sa araw-araw. No? At ang epekto niyan sa health, sa growth at nutrition ng mga bata sa hinaharap.
And also productivity, katulad nga ng what I was discussing with the previous guest, no? Kailangan i-upskill yung workforce. Excuse me, sir. And in that sense, what else is needed to be done here apart from the wage increase? Do you feel like we are doing enough, the government is doing enough to fight inflation, to keep it
kulang
controlled?
Kasi yung kadiwa, makakatulong sana. Pero kung ipapalawakin yan hanggang sa communities to subsidize yung mga basic goods na mabibili ng mga formal workers natin, minimum wage earners, mula sa factories hanggang sa communities, makakatulong na malaki. Second, syempre, dapat itim talaga yung presyo ng mga bilihin yung sa bigas, asukal, etc. Dapat pamuray, i-subsidize yung presyo na yan. Pangatlo siguro, bigyan ng mga ayuda yung mga informal sectors natin, yung mga tricycle drivers, mga vendors, fisher folks, at iba pa. Direct na ayuda, labas pa doon sa 4Ps, nang sa ganun makakagapay sila. So, tingin ko naman, merong windfall dito sa value-added tax collection natin nung tumaas yung presyo So, pwedeng gamitin yon, no, na windfall sa collection to address yung mga needs like ayuda at iba pang suporta para pamurahin yung presyo ng basic goods and services natin.
Meron naman pong ayuda nung during the pandemic, during the lockdown. Meron naman binigay na ayuda.
Wala na yun after the lockdown.
So you mean to say dapat i-continue pa?
I-continue pa dapat. Kasi meron namang, sabi nga sa pag-aaral naman ng NEDA, may windfall sa VAT collection kasi tumaas yung presyo ng services at goods. So may tumaas yung collection ng VAT, baka yun ang pwedeng pang-ayuda.
I think that's going to be a discussion for another day because I don't think the government has enough money. But that's all the time we have for today. We thank you so much for your time, Rene Magtubo, chairperson ng Partido ng Manggagawa and spokesperson for Nagkaisa Labor Coalition. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much po. Thank you very much.
Agenda will pause for a quick break again. Keep it here on One News, all sides, all the time. Welcome back to Agenda. I'm Regina Lay. United States President Joe Biden promised a quote-unquote full accounting of what happened in the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. Meanwhile, the Bankers Association of the Philippines has assured the public that this will not have a material impact on Philippine banks. To talk more about this, let me bring in my last guest for the day, economist Ronilo Balbieran. Let's get to know him in this short video.
Ronilo Balbieran is vice president of the think tank called Research, Education and Institutional Development, or READ Foundation Incorporated. Balbieran also teaches economics at the University of Asia and the Pacific.
Ronilo, good morning. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning.
Let me get right to the heart of the matter, right? Because although not many people in the Philippines know this bank, and I'm talking about Silicon Valley Bank, there have been a lot of very alarming headlines in recent days. And also, I wanted to point out, they are a major lender in Silicon Valley, and this is the second largest bank failure in the United States. So my question is, should we be worried?
The quickest answer there is we should not be worried because in the first place, the Americans should not be worried because the Silicon Valley Bank is not even part of the top 10 banks of America. So that occupies not a sizable part or share in the total asset of the banking sector of America. And therefore, if they should not be worried, more so the Philippines should not be worried about that particular crisis of that bank in America.
It's not a Wall Street too big to fail bank, in other words.
It's substantially big, but not as big. Or for example, it's around $200 billion, but JP Morgan has more than $3 trillion in assets, so it's not even comparable. But what is the problem? The problem is it might actually lead to a panic mode. So perceptions and panic are not a good combination, and therefore it might affect the overall trust of the citizens and the businesses, the startup community, on the financial sector, and this could get into the burning of the animal spirit, as we call it in macroeconomics. No? So that's why the President Biden, immediately addressed the situation and told everybody, "Hey guys, the situation is under control. This is not as big as you think. Don't pull out your deposits to your banks, because your deposits are safe, because most of the banks are still in good condition, have good capital structures, and therefore no need to panic, and because panicking will just affect our economy unnecessarily."
That's right. Tame your animal spirits, kumbaga. And in fact, I was just reporting that the Bankers Association of the Philippines has already issued a statement saying that there's no substantial or material impact to the local banks here, that most of the major banks here have strong capital and liquidity ratios that exceed the BSP standards. Now, do you think that means we'll never see a bank run here?
Yes, because there are two things, no? Number one, the banks have good capital structure. So we are actually, the asset structure of our banks are actually founded on fundamental and traditional assets, no? So these are backed by, deposits by our businesses, by our OFW families. So these are real assets, no? So our banks have not been engaging in risky, adventurous investment activities. So therefore, the total assets of our banking sector is very, very strong, very fundamental, and backed up by real values. So as against other banks in other countries, so they are actually backed by cryptocurrency values, which are subject to very high volatilities. And so you do not want to be pegging the entire structure of your assets, the assets of your banking industry, so to some volatile investment assets. So that's one. So our banking sector is founded on real business loans, real deposits by actual depositors, by actual money, actual properties. So therefore, we are very, very strong. In fact, our problem is we are so strong. Our banking sector is oozing with money. Their problem is the reverse. No, the problem of our banking sector is they have so much money they don't know who to lend it to, because all the businesses, all the consumers have already borrowed, and we still have more than 3 trillion worth of deposits that are looking for the right borrowers, the right investors who will borrow from our banks. No? So that's first part. The second part is our BSP, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, and the Securities and Exchange Commission of the Philippines have very, very strict fiduciary rules against risky behavior. And so therefore, we have not relaxed them as against other countries who have relaxed, who have allowed banks to engage in risky behavior, and that what actually led to the global recession, the financial crisis in the West. So these rules have not been relaxed in the Philippines, and so therefore we are very thankful that our regulators are very strict, very responsible, and therefore our banks, our investment houses have been following them religiously, and therefore we are in this situation that we have very strong financial assets backing up our economy.
Those are very good points. But Ronilo, for the benefit of our viewers who are not in the banking space, can you talk us through what risky lending means? Because when you look at it, Silicon Valley Bank, they are said to have overinvested in bonds. I mean, bonds are safe, right? So on the surface of it, you would think, oh, hindi naman siya ganun ka risky, but there are specific definitions around this. Talk us through that.
So there are two items there, no? So banks are financial intermediaries. So ibig sabihin, nasa gitna sila ng those who are seeking for money and those who have surplus of money and they deposit them. So for those who have deposited their money, so the Silicon Valley Bank put them in the so-called safe bonds. No? Ano yung bonds? No? Parang promises of the government that they will pay. So the government in a way borrowed money from Silicon Valley. So the Silicon Valley purchased those promises from the government. The problem is, no, so the value of those bonds will be dependent on the interest rate. No? So ibig sabihin, kapag pag tumataas ang interest rate and you have purchased these bonds with a certain return. So kapag mas tumataas na yung interest rate, so the value of what you have right now, which you have purchased months before or years before, will now be relatively less valuable. Kasi people would be buying newer bonds. No? So therefore, if you're left with those bonds you purchased last year, 2 years ago, so the value of those bonds, the value of those promises of the American government will be less valuable. And so therefore, kapag you are now trying to finance, no? So maraming mga depositors, for example, si Silicon Bank, for whatever reason, they are withdrawing their money. So they need to encash, no, those particular assets, no, yung ano na yun. But when they sell them now, because interest rates are higher, therefore the value of those papers, those assets are now less expensive. So they are now actually selling those assets at a loss. So, and you are experiencing some major withdrawals from Silicon Valley. And you are actually encashing those promises of the government at a loss, and so you will be actually bleeding money because of those losses. So basically, because of very aggressive Fed increases of the policy rates, no, interest rates, that affected the total holdings of Silicon Valley. No, na ang dami nilang hawak na promises. Pero sandali lang, may bagong promise na ngayon na mas mataas yung value. So naiwanan sila doon sa mas murang value, and they keep on encashing those, and they are bleeding by the billions, 10 billion, 20 billion dollars, and then everybody got panicked. Therefore, biglang ang ano niyan, you don't want a bank run. Ang tawag doon bank run, no, nag-aalisan, no, nagtatakbuhan palayo sa iyo. And when the people, your depositors, are withdrawing those, what will be the value of the bank? The value of the bank is the total value of the trust. Ganyan lang naman eh. In economics, money is equal to trust. When trust is broken and your depositors started running away from you, your total value will suddenly disappear in hours or days. Matagal na yung months, no? So, and therefore, before that fire, so I think at the Silicon Valley level, that's when the fire really, spread so fast. So, and ang ayaw nang mangyari ng mga regulators is for that to spread in other banks, just because the depositors have run out of trust, no? So so parang sasabihin, hindi totoo 'yan sa ibang bangko, ha. So meron tong ibang ano. So ganun po 'yung nangyari. So it's just a simple uncontrollable panic, no? So it would have been very avoidable. From that point of view, now it was addressed na, well, hey, wait, your deposits were not invested totally in crypto, no? So we did not invest your deposits in crypto. We are invested in American government's bonds. So your money is safe with us. Just what happened was, it was a fire spread very, very quickly.
Right. So contagion talaga. And so basically, naipit yung Silicon Valley Bank because of high interest rates that they did not foresee. And then, you have the first few customers suddenly withdrawing their deposits out of fear. And then that spread rapidly because contagion is like that, right? Like within a matter of hours, you're having a lot of people panic. What lessons are there for Philippine banks? I know you already said we don't engage in risky lending, but surely there are lessons here to be drawn from that example as well.
Well, they have to be learning very carefully from these lessons. No, it's good news and bad news that we have not heavily engaged in crypto trading, cryptocurrencies, investments in all these very risky assets. So, but I think it's unavoidable to be embracing these newer forms of assets. But good news and bad news, we really have to really study this very carefully, and how to combine this with our fundamental traditional assets, and how to actually address this situation in matter of hours or days, and to explain to the people, hey guys, this is not what you imagine this problem this is to be. So therefore, relax, don't withdraw your money. Our assets, your money is safe with us. So I think we are praying. So I think BSP is really doing a lot of experimentation in terms of sandboxing regulations, in terms of cryptocurrency, in terms of all these newer forms of assets. And so therefore, I think I'm very confident. I'm very confident that we will learn from this. And no, good news, bad news for them, good news for us, because we will be learning from them. Nauna na yung crisis nila, and so therefore the interrelationship between the crisis with the FTX, yung nagko-collapse yung mga cryptos that went into the Silicon Valley, and then went into very aggressive interest rate hikes. We did not do that. Our BSP did not engage in very aggressive interest rate hikes. So because they are very careful exactly of this particular situation. And so I think this will be a very, very rough learning for us. But I think we will learn slowly but surely from this process.
And apart from, well, I have to point out there that the BSP is still, having to be aggressive in terms of interest rates, right? Because of the high inflation. But in the long run, you don't see much of an impact then on the Philippine banking industry, apart from, what we've already seen at the stock market, which is obviously banking shares took the biggest blow in trading yesterday. And that's across Asia, right? So apart from that impact, you don't see much more impact rippling out to Asia, to us.
Yeah, because these are perceptions. So we've had Asian financial crisis, we have the global recession, the subprime crisis, but we were not affected by those. Why? Because our rules are different. Our rules here in the Philippines are very, very strict. Our liquidity is very huge. We have a huge surplus, and so therefore our environment here in the Philippines is exactly the opposite of what they are experiencing right now in the US. So our problem is actually, how do we actually use the money that we have so much here? So how do we actually activate public-private partnership? How do we actually unlock? You were talking about agricultural productivity to help our farmers, our minimum wage earners, to battle inflation. So how do we actually unlock productivity of the agriculture? And these are fiscal policy side. So monetary is doing its best, but it can only do so much. So if we have the fiscal policy helping this productivity of agriculture, which is agribusiness is more than 50% of our entire economy. If that particular agribusiness sector will actually increase its productivity, this will be able to activate the loans of our businesses, and so this should only be good for our banks that are really looking for more borrowers in terms of good businesses, good investments, etc. So it can only be better for all of us because regulations are in place. and the opportunities for a better agribusiness sector is just around the horizon. Our president is the secretary of the Department of Agriculture. So we can expect in the next 3 to 5 years that this agribusiness, more than 50% of our economy, will boom. And therefore, this should be good news for our entire banking sector, giving loans to agribusiness related businesses.
Well, here's hoping that pans out. Thank you so much for your time today, economist Ronilo Balbieran. Fantastic insights.
Thank you.
And that is it for us today on Agenda. Sitting in for Sita Beltran, I'm Regina Lay. Thanks for tuning in. This is One News, all sides, all the time.